Okay, guys, so this video is on the passive voice. So some of you have talked to me about the passive before, but it is when do we use it and how do we use it? That's basically what the few next lessons are going to be about. So first of all, what is the passive voice? Well, the passive is when the action is done, is not... when the action is done to the subject and not by the subject, like when you're the victim of the verb a little bit. So for example, if you're saying that the library is being decorated, it's not the library that is decorating, right? It's the library that is being decorated. Someone else is doing the decoration here, okay? They're doing the decorating to the library. It's not just the library that is decorating itself, if that makes sense. So why do we use the passive voice in general? It's something that we use a lot in English, less so in French, but it's still very important to know it, and it looks good sometimes. So why do we use the passive? It's often used to focus on the action rather than on the person who's performing the action. Sometimes we also use it to conceal the subject. So if you break a glass and then your parent asks you, what happened when they were not here, and you say, well, the glass being broken, you don't want to actually emphasize the fact that you were the one doing it. Okay, so like when you don't want to, when you don't know who the subject is, or when you're like just rather not mention them, if that makes sense. So like now, how do you know that a sentence is in the passive? Because sometimes it will look a bit confusing. Is it an active or is it a passive sentence? So first of all, in a passive sentence, the subject is not mentioned, or if it is, it will be at the end of the sentence, and it would be before, no, followed by, no, it would be right after the word by, basically. So like if you say the car was stolen by a thief. So here, the thief is the subject here. Is the person who performed the action. He's the one who stole the car. But here you just want to say that you want to emphasize the fact that the car was stolen. You don't actually want to emphasize who did it. You don't actually care, or you don't know. So just say the car was stolen by a thief. But by the thief is in bracket here. You don't actually need to write it. It's not compulsory. You can just say that the car was stolen. Okay? So if you want to make sure that a sentence is passive or that it's not, try to add by and then add a subject. And if it makes sense, then it's a passive voice. If it doesn't, then it's an active sentence. So for example, if you say the window was broken, if you can add by me, then it makes sense. And here you can, the window was broken by me. So la vitre a été cassée par moi, or par, I don't know, Pete, right? The window was broken by Pete. The window was broken. Here it's a passive sentence because you can add the by Pete at the end and actually makes sense. But let's say, for example, Pete broke the window by Pete. Doesn't make any sense. You're like repeating stuff. Or I broke the window by me. Still doesn't make any sense. So here that would be an active sentence, okay? Because you already know who's performing the action is me, or is Pete breaking the window. Yeah. Now, question: can every verb be made a passive verb? Can you do that with every single verb? And the answer is no. Actually, you can't. You can only make a passive sentence with verbs that have that do not have indirect object. How am I going to say that? So verbs that need an indirect object, you won't be able to make them passive. So let me find an example. So for example, right, the verb to go, okay? The verb to go, you need to have something after. You can't say I'm going and that's it. You need, I mean, except when you say bye, I'm going, but that is included, it's like it's implied. You already know what the person is going because it's implied. You wouldn't just say, oh, I'm going. Then so, like if you haven't talked about it before, the person will be like, wait, you going where? So you need to have a complement here. You need to have an object. So when you need to have an object here, you can't be made passive. You can say, I have been gone. I mean, you can, but that's not the passive anymore. You can't say, I have been gone by me. That just doesn't make any sense, okay? So when you need an object, when it's necessary for you to have an object in the verb, you can't make it passive. When it's a verb that could technically stand alone, so for example, to eat, you don't need to say, I eat an apple. It's not necessary. You can just say, I eat. What are you doing at the moment? Oh, I'm eating, right? You don't need to complete it by an object. Therefore, you could use it as a passive. You could say, I have been eaten. Sorry, I am eaten. You can say that. I am eaten by a giant rhino. I don't know. It's just the first animal that came to my mind. So here you could use that. But if you use the verb to go, for example, because it is necessary to give a destination, it is necessary to complete the verb with something, therefore you can't make it passive, if that makes any sort of sense. So that is basically the lesson about what the passive is and what is used for. Next video will be about actually how to create it, how to formulate it. So I can't wait to see you in there in a few minutes. See you soon.